For 8 years, the little girl touched her right ear. It was a nervous habit, a silent plea that went completely unnoticed by everyone around her. Every doctor, from the specialists at Johns Hopkins to the neurologists in Berlin, said the exact same thing. "There is nothing we can do, Mrs. Harrison. The damage is nerve-based. It is permanent." Her mother, Victoria Harrison, spent over $2 million. She flew across 3 continents, begging specialists to look again, to try harder, to find an answer. They all shrugged, offered their sympathies, and handed her the bill. Then, a 68-year-old school janitor noticed something no one else did, and what he found inside that child's ear will leave you speechless. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Victoria Harrison wasn't just rich, she was a force of nature. As the CEO of Harrison Energy Corporation, she commanded boardrooms in New York, London, and Dubai. She had a private jet parked at a hangar in Westchester, a fleet of luxury SUVs with full security details, and more money than most people would see in 20 lifetimes. But her daughter Maya was born deaf, 8 years old, and she had never heard the sound of the Atlantic Ocean crashing against the shore near their summer home. She'd never heard the sound of her own name. Victoria tried everything: the specialists at Massachusetts General, the private clinics in Switzerland, the experimental facilities in Berlin. Doctors who charged tens of thousands of dollars per hour just to review a chart. They ran tests, MRIs, CT scans, invasive procedures that made Maya cry silently in hospital rooms. All of them said the same thing: congenital sensorineural hearing loss, irreversible. "You need to accept this, Mrs. Harrison." But Victoria couldn't accept it, because Maya was all she had left. Her husband, Thomas, had died in a horrific accident on Interstate 95 just 2 months before Maya was born. He never got to hold his daughter, never got to see her face. So Victoria kept searching, kept spending, kept begging God and every specialist in America for an answer. What she didn't know was that the answer wasn't coming from a hospital in Europe. It wasn't coming from a specialist with 3 decades of experience. It was coming from the elderly man she'd just hired to maintain the grounds of her estate. Robert Miller was 68 years old. He had a degree in chemistry from a state university. But in the competitive job market of the Northeast, a degree didn't guarantee anything, especially not for someone his age. He had no connections, no powerful friends, just a man trying to pay for his granddaughter's medical treatments after his daughter passed away. When the job posting appeared for a groundskeeper at the Harrison estate, Robert applied immediately. He didn't care that he was overqualified. He didn't care about the long hours maintaining 3 acres of property. He just needed the salary. But Robert noticed something about Maya that every specialist with decades of training had somehow missed. Something deep in her ear, something dark. And one humid afternoon, while Victoria was away at a corporate gala in Manhattan, he made a decision that would either save that girl's life or send him to prison. The Harrison estate stretched across 3 acres of prime real estate in Southampton. From the outside, it looked like paradise. High walls topped with security cameras, white marble columns, windows that sparkled in the Long Island sunlight, gardens trimmed to perfection. But inside, there was silence. Not the peaceful kind of silence you find in a library. Not the kind that feels like rest. This silence was heavy, thick, oppressive, like something had died in the air and no one had acknowledged it. The domestic staff moved through the hallways without speaking. Their footsteps were soft, careful on the Italian marble floors. They had learned quickly. Mrs. Harrison liked things quiet. No music played in that house. No television noise. No laughter echoing off the high ceilings. Just silence. And somewhere in that silence, a mother was drowning. Victoria sat in her study most evenings, staring at the family portrait on the wall. There he was, Thomas, her late husband, looking strong, looking alive. The guilt sat on Victoria's chest like a weight she couldn't lift. If she hadn't asked him to drive to the office that night, maybe he wouldn't have been on the interstate. Maybe Maya wouldn't have been born into such devastating stress. So, she did the only thing she knew how to do. She spent money, flying to the best specialists on earth. Every doctor said the same thing. Your daughter's deafness is from birth. There's nothing we can do. You need to accept this. Accept it. How could she accept that her daughter would live in a bubble of silence forever? How could she accept that Maya would never hear her say, "I love you"? So, she kept writing checks, kept hoping. She didn't realize the answer wasn't coming from a specialist. It was coming from someone she'd never think to look at twice, someone who was about to discover a truth that would shatter everything. Robert arrived on a rainy Tuesday morning in September. He stood at the service entrance of the Harrison estate, clutching his worn toolbox, trying to steady his breathing. This was it, his last chance. The head housekeeper, Mrs. Patricia Coleman, met him at the security gate. She was a woman with a stern face and sharp eyes, the kind of woman who noticed everything and forgave nothing. She looked Robert up and down, with barely concealed disdain. "You're Robert Miller?" she asked, her voice clipped. "Yes, ma'am," Robert replied, removing his cap respectfully. "You'll maintain the grounds. You'll ensure the gardens are pristine. You'll repair anything that needs fixing. And most importantly," she leaned in, "you will stay quiet. Mrs. Harrison does not like noise, especially around her daughter." Robert nodded vigorously. "I understand, ma'am." "Do you?" Mrs. Coleman challenged. "Because the last groundskeeper didn't. He tried to interact with the child, thought he could entertain her. He was dismissed the same day." She stepped closer. "Do not interact with the girl unless it's a matter of life and death. Do I make myself clear?" Robert swallowed hard. "Yes, ma'am. I'm just here to work." Days turned into weeks. Robert settled into the routine. He trimmed hedges. He maintained the flower beds. He repaired the garden fountains. He kept his head down, just like Mrs. Coleman told him. But he couldn't stop watching Maya. Every morning, the same routine played out. The girl would sit alone in the garden near the maintenance shed, surrounded by expensive toys she didn't play with. Her world was small, contained, safe. No one bothered her there. The other staff avoided her, not out of cruelty, but out of fear. They treated her like she was made of glass. Some of the drivers whispered near the garage, saying the girl was cursed, that the accident that killed her father had taken her hearing as some kind of spiritual trade-off. Robert frowned when he overheard those conversations, but he saw something different. He saw a child who was desperately lonely, a girl who sat by the roses and watched the world move without her. He saw the way she'd look at her mother's car when it drove through the gates, and how her little shoulders would sink lower when the car didn't stop. And he saw how she touched her ear, over and over, wincing each time. Robert had seen that gesture before, years ago, when he worked briefly at a medical research facility during college. It meant something, and no one was paying attention. Would you have noticed? Would you have seen what everyone else was ignoring? One humid afternoon, the sun blazing over the estate, Robert was trimming hedges near the garden when he saw Maya struggling with a beautiful, expensive kite. The string was tangled in a complex knot. Her small fingers picked at it, pulling and yanking, but the knot only got tighter. Frustration creased her face. She was on the verge of tears. He shouldn't interfere. Mrs. Coleman's warning echoed in his mind, dismissed the same day. But Robert looked at the girl, then at the security cameras. He was in a blind spot near the rose bushes. Before he could stop himself, Robert knelt down near the garden fence. He didn't touch her, but he tapped the ground to create a vibration. Maya looked up, startled. Her eyes were wide, dark, and defensive. Robert smiled, a gentle grandfatherly smile. He pointed to the kite in her hand, then to his own weathered hands, gesturing, "Let me help." For a moment, they just stared at each other. Then slowly, she handed the kite through the gap in the fence. Robert worked quickly. His fingers were rough from decades of manual labor, but still dexterous. He untangled the knot in seconds. He handed it back. Maya looked at the untangled string, then back at him. Then something happened. The tiniest smile, just a flicker at the corner of her mouth. Robert's heart cracked wide open. He smiled back and gave her a small wave. She waved in return. That night, lying in the small staff quarters near the garage, Robert couldn't sleep. He thought about that wave. Such a small thing, but it meant everything. The next morning, he fashioned something from willow branches, a skill he'd learned growing up in rural Pennsylvania. He wove the branches into the shape of a small bird. He left it on the stone bench where Maya always sat. He didn't wait to see if she'd take it, but when he looked later from the maintenance shed window, the bird was gone. In its place, a small piece of paper weighted down by a stone. On it, a drawing of a smiley face. Robert pressed that note to his chest and closed his eyes. God, he whispered into the quiet of the shed. Let me help this child. Show me how. He didn't know it yet, but God was already answering. Over the next few weeks, something shifted. Robert and Maya developed their own silent language. Small things, secret things. When Mrs. Coleman wasn't looking, he would leave her small wonders. A perfectly round stone, a flower that looked like a star, a colorful beetle he'd caught that morning. She would leave him drawings. He learned her signs. Not the formal sign language her expensive tutors taught her, but the personal ones she'd made up herself. The way she tapped her chest twice meant she was happy. The way she pointed to the high walls meant she felt trapped. The way she pressed both palms together meant she felt safe. And slowly, she started using that last sign around him. Safe. Robert treasured that more than his salary. But in a house like the Harrison estate, secrets don't stay secret for long. One evening, Mrs. Coleman cornered him near the tool shed. I've seen you looking at the girl, she hissed. Robert's stomach dropped. Ma'am, I warned you, Robert. Mrs. Coleman's voice was sharp as broken glass. Mrs. Harrison has rules. Staff does not get close to Maya. You're a groundskeeper. You're nobody to her. I'm not trying to cause trouble, ma'am. She's just lonely. That's not your concern. Mrs. Coleman stepped closer, her finger pointing at his face. You're here to maintain the grounds, not to mother that child, not to fix what cannot be fixed. Robert bit his tongue. Fix what cannot be fixed. That's what everyone said. Even here, in this mansion where the girl lived like a princess, they'd all given up on her. They saw her as permanently broken. If Mrs. Harrison finds out you've been interfering, Mrs. Coleman continued, her eyes cold, you'll be gone. No references, no severance, and I'll make sure no one in the Hamptons hires you again. She leaned in closer. Think about your granddaughter. Do you want her to lose her treatments because you wanted to play hero? That night, Robert sat on his narrow bed, staring at the peeling paint on the wall. He thought about his granddaughter in the hospital, the treatments she needed, the salary he desperately couldn't lose. He thought about Maya, her lonely eyes, her pain. He thought about the dark thing he'd seen in her ear when the sunlight hit it just right during their secret exchanges, when she'd tilt her head certain ways. Mrs. Coleman's words echoed. Fix what cannot be fixed. But what if it could be fixed? What if everyone was wrong? Robert picked up his worn Bible and held it close. Lord, I don't know what to do. I can't lose this job. If I lose this job, my granddaughter suffers. But I can't ignore what I'm seeing. He waited in the silence. No voice came from heaven, just the distant hum of the estate's generators. He felt the weight of a decision he wasn't ready to make. A war was beginning inside him, between what he needed to survive and what he knew was right. He didn't know it yet, but that war was about to end, because the next morning, everything would change. The next morning came cold and foggy, an unusual chill for late September. Robert was repairing a section of the garden fence near the main house when he heard it, a soft thud. Then nothing. He stopped, listened. Another sound, like a muffled cry, a sound trapped in a throat. His heart jumped. He looked around. The garden was empty. He followed the sound to the side of the house, near the hidden entrance to the rose garden. And there was Maya. She was sitting on the cold stone pathway, her small body hunched over, both hands pressed tight against her right ear. Her face was twisted in agony, tears streaming down her cheeks. But no sound came from her mouth. She was screaming on the inside, crying in complete silence. Robert dropped his tools and ran to her. Forget Mrs. Coleman, forget the job, forget everything. He knelt in front of her, his hands shaking. Maya, look at me. She opened her eyes, red, wet, full of terror. Robert gently used the simple gestures he'd learned. He pointed to her ear, then to his own eyes, asking permission. Can I look? I'll be gentle, I promise. She hesitated. Fear flickered across her face. She'd seen too many doctors, felt too much cold metal, too many procedures that hurt and never helped. But then she looked at Robert, the man who fixed her kite, the man who made her the willow bird. Slowly she nodded. She leaned forward. This child, who had been poked and prodded by professors and surgeons her whole life, trusted the groundskeeper. Robert swallowed hard. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the small flashlight he used for repairs in the dark spaces. He clicked it on. "Tilt your head," he motioned gently. She tilted her head toward the morning light. Robert leaned in close, holding his breath. He shone the light directly into her ear canal. There it was. Deep inside, past where a casual glance would see, was something dark, dense, glistening like hardened stone. But it was bigger than before. It had shifted. It looked angry, inflamed. Robert's breath stopped. It was undeniable. How had every doctor missed this? How had every scan in Berlin and Boston overlooked it? Robert's mind raced back to his childhood, to his uncle who had gone deaf for 3 years until a country doctor finally pulled out a hardened blockage of wax and foreign material. The city doctors had called it nerve damage then too. His hands trembled. He used simple gestures to communicate with Maya. "There's something in your ear, something that shouldn't be there. We need to tell your mother." Panic exploded across her face. Her hands moved fast, frantic, using the personal signs they had developed. "No. No doctors. Please. They hurt me. Always hurt. Never help." Robert's heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. He understood. 8 years of specialists, 8 years of procedures, 8 years of pain with no relief. She had learned that help meant suffering. He took her small hands in his rough, weathered ones. He looked into her eyes. "I would never hurt you," he whispered, hoping she could read his lips. Never. He sat with her until the tears dried, until her hands stopped shaking. Then he walked back to the maintenance shed, his mind spinning. He knew what he had seen. He knew what it meant. But what could he do? Tell Mrs. Harrison? She would look at him, a 68-year-old groundskeeper in a worn uniform, and laugh. Or worse, she'd fire him for touching her daughter. She'd call more specialists, the same ones who'd missed it for years. The same ones who were perhaps bleeding her bank accounts dry. That night, Robert didn't sleep. He paced the small floor of his quarters. He thought about the expensive consultations he'd seen receipts for in the recycling, hundreds of thousands of dollars every year for ongoing treatment. If he was right, this was criminal negligence at minimum. If he was wrong, he was about to commit a crime himself. "Lord," he whispered, his voice cracking, "what do you want from me?" Silence. Just the ticking of the clock on the wall. Tick-tock, tick-tock. He thought about his younger brother David, who died of an asthma attack when they were teenagers because their family couldn't afford proper medication. He'd watched him struggle to breathe, watched him fade. Robert had promised himself that day, never again. He would never stand by while the child suffered if he had the power to stop it. But this was different. This wasn't his brother. This was the daughter of one of the most powerful women in New York. And he was nobody. Robert stopped pacing. He reached under his bed and pulled out his toolbox. Inside, wrapped in clean cloth, he had a pair of fine-tipped tweezers he used for precision repair work, removing splinters, handling tiny screws. He'd sterilized them just yesterday with rubbing alcohol, as he always did. He looked at the tweezers. He looked at his hands. "God," he breathed, "I'm scared. I'm so scared. But if this is what you're asking..." He thought of his pastor's words from Sunday service weeks ago. God doesn't call the equipped, he equips the called. Robert wiped the sweat from his forehead. He made a decision. Tomorrow, if Maya showed that kind of pain again, he would act. He would trust what his eyes had seen, even if it cost him everything, even if it meant prison. He climbed into bed, heart pounding. Sleep wouldn't come, but a strange, heavy peace did. The kind of peace that comes when you've decided to step off the cliff and trust that God will catch you. Tomorrow was coming, and with it, the moment that would change the Harrison family forever. What would you have done in that moment? Would you have taken the risk? If you're still watching at this point, drop a comment with, "I'm still here." Let's see who's truly following this shocking story. The next evening came too quickly. Mrs. Harrison was still at her office in Manhattan. She had a board meeting that was running late. The house was relatively quiet. Robert was doing his evening rounds near the main building, checking the irrigation system, when he heard it, a loud crash, then a scream that was cut short. His heart stopped. It came from inside the house. near the side hallway. He ran. He didn't care about the rules. He burst through the service door. Maya lay on the marble hallway floor, curled in a fetal position. A crystal vase lay shattered beside her. Both her hands were clamped over her right ear. Her face was purple with agony. She was rocking back and forth, her mouth open in a silent wail of torture. Robert dropped to his knees beside her, glass crunched under his boots. "I'm here, Maya. I'm here." She looked at him, eyes rolling back. She grabbed his hand and pressed it to her ear, begging him wordlessly to make it stop. Robert looked at her ear. The area around the canal was red and swollen. The dark mass was pushing outward, angry, visible even without a light now. It was shifting, causing immense pressure. An infection was likely setting in. Footsteps were coming. He could hear Mrs. Coleman shouting from the kitchen. "What was that noise? Who's in there?" He had seconds, maybe less. Robert reached into his pocket. He pulled out the sterile tweezers, wrapped carefully in clean cloth. He'd carried them all day just in case. His breath came in short bursts. "Lord," he whispered, "guide my hands. Please guide my hands." Maya looked up at him. She saw the tool. Fear spiked in her eyes. But then another wave of pain washed over her. She looked at Robert, really looked at him, and gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. Robert steadied himself. He took a deep breath. He gently positioned her head with one hand and moved the tweezers toward her ear canal with the other. "Stay still," he prayed silently. His hand shook once, then steadied. He was a groundskeeper, yes. But he was also a man who'd sutured his own wounds more than once, who'd done precision work his entire life. He focused. He felt the metal tip touch the object. It was hard, dense, yet sticky. He hooked the edge of it carefully. "Hold on, Maya." He gritted his teeth. He pulled. Resistance. It was stuck fast, cemented by years of neglect and buildup. He pulled again, slower, more consistent pressure. Squelch. Something gave way. Maya arched her back, her eyes squeezing shut, her fingernails digging into Robert's arm. With one final steady tug, the object slid free. It landed in Robert's palm. He stared at it, his stomach turning. It was shocking. A dense black plug almost the size of a large marble, composed of hardened wax, dirt, and what looked like the remains of a small insect from years ago, all calcified into a stone-like mass that had completely sealed her ear canal. But before Robert could react, Maya gasped. It wasn't a silent gasp. It was a sharp intake of air that made sound, an actual audible gasp. Her hand flew to her ear. Her eyes snapped open, wider than he'd ever seen them. Pupils dilated. She sat up suddenly, looking around the hallway like she'd landed on a different planet. Then she froze. She pointed at the grandfather clock standing 10 feet away. The antique clock that had been ticking in this hallway since before she was born. The clock she'd walked past 1,000 times and never acknowledged. Her mouth opened. A sound came out, rough, broken, unpracticed, like a rusty hinge moving for the first time. "Tick," she whispered. Robert's tears fell instantly, hot and fast. "Yes, Maya, that's the clock. You can hear it." Maya's whole body trembled. She touched her throat, feeling the vibration of her own voice for the first time. Her eyes filled with wonder and fear and something else, hope, blinding and bright. She looked at Robert. Her mouth opened again. One word. The first real word she'd ever spoken. A word she must have practiced in her head 1,000,000 times, watching her mother's lips move. "Mama," she croaked. Robert sobbed. "Yes, yes, Mama." And then heavy footsteps thundered down the hallway. "What is going on here?" Robert looked up. Mrs. Coleman stood in the doorway, her face a mask of shock and fury. Behind her, 2 security guards were approaching rapidly. Her eyes locked on Maya, on the floor among broken glass, and the groundskeeper kneeling beside her. And then she saw the blood on Robert's hands, a tiny smear from where the blockage had torn the delicate skin slightly upon exit. "What have you done?" Mrs. Coleman's voice shook with rage and terror. "Security, get over here now!" She rushed forward, pushing Robert aside with surprising strength. She grabbed Maya by the shoulders. "Did he hurt you? Did this man touch you?" Maya flinched at the sound, so loud, so sharp in her newly hearing ear. But then she looked at Mrs. Coleman. Loud, Maya said. Her voice was scratchy, uncertain. You, loud. Mrs. Coleman froze. Her whole body went rigid. What? She whispered. What did you just... Maya reached up and touched Mrs. Coleman's face. Too loud, she repeated, wincing. For one moment, wonder crossed Mrs. Coleman's face. But then her eyes landed on Robert's open palm, the blood, the tweezers, the dark, disgusting mass sitting there. Terror overtook wonder. She didn't see a cure. She saw a groundskeeper holding what looked like a weapon and a piece of the child's body. "Security!" she bellowed, her voice cracking. "Call the police, now!" The two security guards stepped forward immediately. "Get him away from her, immediately!" Robert's heart shattered. "Mrs. Coleman, please listen to me. I didn't hurt her. I helped her. Look." He held out his palm, showing the blockage. This was inside her ear. This is why she couldn't hear. The doctors missed it. I removed it carefully. She can hear now. Don't you understand? She can hear. "You're a groundskeeper," Mrs. Coleman said, her voice shaking with a mix of protective rage and genuine fear. "You're not a doctor. You could have pierced her eardrum. You could have caused an infection. You could have killed her." The guards grabbed Robert's arms, twisting them behind his back. The pain was sharp. Maya screamed. Actually screamed. A raw, guttural sound of protest that echoed off the marble walls. "No, no." The sound of her voice, loud, desperate, real, stopped Mrs. Coleman cold for a moment, but the fear was too strong, the protective instinct too deep. 8 years of being told don't let anyone unqualified touch her was too ingrained. "Take him to the security office," Mrs. Coleman commanded, her voice trembling. "Call 911. I want him arrested for assault and practicing medicine without a license." "No," Maya cried, grabbing at Robert's leg as the guards pulled him backward. "It's okay, Maya," Robert said. Even as the guards dragged him backward, his feet scraping against the marble, he looked at the little girl. "You're okay. You can hear. That's all that matters." "Move!" the guard shouted, shoving Robert toward the door. As they dragged him away, Robert looked back one final time. He saw Mrs. Coleman clutching Maya, rocking her, while Maya stared after him, sobbing, loud, messy, heartbreaking sobs. The first sounds of grief she had ever made. The first sounds anyone had ever heard from her. Within minutes, squad cars arrived. Red and blue lights painted the walls of the Harrison estate. Robert was placed in handcuffs and led to a police cruiser. As the sirens wailed, a sound he knew Maya could now hear, he closed his eyes. He was going to jail. He had lost his job. His granddaughter would likely not get her treatments now. But he remembered the sound of that word, tick, and that other word, mama. And he smiled in the darkness of the police car. He had done the right thing. Whatever came next, he could face it knowing that. The call came through to Victoria's phone at 8:47 in the evening. She was still in the boardroom in Manhattan, wrapping up negotiations on a billion-dollar merger. When she saw it was Mrs. Coleman calling, the head housekeeper never called unless it was an emergency. Her heart stopped. "Mrs. Harrison," Mrs. Coleman's voice was shaking. "There's been an incident with Maya. You need to come home immediately." Victoria was in her car within 2 minutes, her driver pushing the speed limit the entire way back to Southampton. The 90-minute drive felt like an eternity. When Victoria burst through the front door of the estate, Mrs. Coleman was waiting in the foyer with the 2 security guards. "Where is she? What happened?" "She's upstairs in her room, ma'am. She's physically fine, but..." "But what?" Victoria's voice was ice. "Tell me exactly what happened." Mrs. Coleman explained everything. The crash, finding Maya on the floor in pain, the groundskeeper kneeling over her with tweezers, the blood. "We've called the police," Mrs. Coleman continued. "They've taken him into custody. He'll be charged with assault on a minor and practicing medicine without." "Wait." Victoria held up her hand. Her mind was racing. "You said Maya was on the floor, in pain." "Yes, ma'am." Holding her ear, she appeared to be in significant distress. "And this man, Robert, he did what exactly?" "He used tweezers, ma'am. He removed something from her ear. It looked like a large mass of... I don't know what it was. It was horrible looking. There was blood, and... Where is this mass now?" Mrs. Coleman paused. "The police, they took it as evidence." Victoria's jaw tightened. And you said Maya is fine? Well, yes, she seems to be, but, ma'am, he could have seriously injured. Take me to my daughter, now. Victoria took the stairs 2 at a time. She burst into Maya's bedroom. Maya was sitting on her bed, still wearing her clothes from earlier, now rumpled and stained. Her face was blotchy from crying. She looked up when the door opened, and she said something that made Victoria's world stop spinning. "Mama," Maya said, "you're home." Victoria froze. Her expensive handbag slipped from her shoulder and hit the floor with a thud. Maya flinched at the sound. "Loud," she said, putting her hands over her ears. Victoria's legs wouldn't move. Her brain couldn't process what was happening. "Maya," she whispered, Can you hear me?" Maya nodded. "Yes." Her voice was rough, unpracticed, but real. "I hear you, Mama. I hear everything. It's so loud. Everything is so loud." Victoria's vision blurred with tears. She crossed the room in 3 steps and pulled Maya into her arms. "You can hear me," Victoria sobbed into her daughter's hair. "Oh my God, you can hear me." "Yes," Maya whispered against her mother's chest. "Robert, help me. There was something in my ear, Mama, something bad." He took it out. "Now I can hear." Victoria pulled back, looking at her daughter's face. "Robert, the groundskeeper?" Maya nodded, and then her face crumpled. "They took him away, Mama. The police took him away. But he helped me. He didn't hurt me. He helped me." The realization hit Victoria like a physical blow. The blood Mrs. Coleman had seen wasn't from an injury. It was from the extraction. The man hadn't assaulted her daughter. He'd cured her. Victoria stood up abruptly. "Mrs. Coleman!" she shouted. The housekeeper appeared in the doorway. "Yes, ma'am. Get my car ready. We're going to the hospital. Right now. I need doctors to examine Maya immediately." "Of course, ma'am." Victoria turned back to Maya. "We're going to have doctors look at your ear, sweetheart, just to make sure you're okay. Do you understand?" Maya's face filled with fear. "More doctors?" Victoria cupped her daughter's face in her hands. "I promise. I'll be with you the whole time. They're just going to look. No procedures unless you say it's okay. I promise." As they headed downstairs, Victoria's mind was already racing ahead. If Robert had actually cured Maya, if he'd done what 47 specialists couldn't do, then she had just had an innocent man arrested, and she needed to fix that immediately. They arrived at Southampton Hospital at 10:15 in the evening. Dr. Michael Stevens, the chief of otolaryngology and a personal friend of Victoria's family, met them in a private examination room. "Victoria," he said, concern etched on his face. "Patricia called me. She said there was an emergency with Maya. What happened?" Victoria's voice was tight. Someone removed an obstruction from Maya's ear, and now she can hear. Dr. Stevens' expression shifted from concern to complete disbelief. "That's Victoria. Maya's hearing loss is congenital. It's nerve-based. The auditory nerves don't function. We've confirmed this with multiple." "Michael," Victoria interrupted, her voice sharp. "My daughter just spoke to me. Full sentences. She can hear sounds. She flinched when I dropped my bag because it was too loud. Please examine her, now." Dr. Stevens looked at Maya, who was sitting quietly in the examination chair. He approached carefully. "Hello, Maya," he said softly. Maya turned toward his voice. "Hello," she said, her voice still rough and uncertain. Dr. Stevens' face went pale. My God. He spent the next 40 minutes conducting a thorough examination. He used an advanced otoscope to peer deep into Maya's ear canal. He tested her hearing response at different frequencies and volumes. He checked for any signs of damage or infection. The room was silent except for the soft tones of the hearing tests and the scratching of Dr. Stevens' pen on his notepad. Finally, Dr. Stevens sat back. He removed his examination gloves slowly, methodically. He looked at Victoria, and his expression was unreadable. "Victoria," he said quietly, "I need to see Maya's complete medical history. Every examination. Every report from every specialist she's ever seen." Victoria pulled out her phone. "I have copies of everything. My assistant scans and files every document." "What did you find?" Dr. Stevens pulled up the digital otoscope images on the computer screen. "Look at this," he said, pointing to the screen. "This is the image from inside Maya's right ear canal. The tympanic membrane, the eardrum, is completely intact. It's healthy. Pink. functioning normally. "That's good, right?" Victoria asked. "It's better than good. It's perfect." Dr. Stevens zoomed in on another part of the image. "There's some minor irritation here, consistent with a recent extraction, but no perforation, no infection." Whoever removed that obstruction did so with incredible precision. He pulled up Maya's old medical files on the adjacent screen. He started scrolling through examination notes from various specialists. His expression darkened. "Victoria, look at this. This is from a consultation Maya had in Berlin 3 years ago." He pointed to a line in the report. "Right here." The specialist noted unusual density observed in right ear canal. But then in the official diagnosis, he wrote congenital sensor neural hearing loss, permanent auditory nerve dysfunction. Dr. Stevens clicked to another file. "And here, Boston Children's Hospital, 4 years ago." The examining physician noted possible foreign body or obstruction, but given patient history, likely anatomical anomaly, he pulled up another Johns Hopkins, 2 years ago. Significant occlusion of the canal, consistent with impacted cerumen and possible foreign object, but unlikely to be cause of hearing loss given established diagnosis. Victoria felt her blood run cold. "What are you saying, Michael?" Dr. Stevens turned to face her, and his expression was a mixture of anger and shame. "I'm saying that multiple specialists saw the obstruction, Victoria. They noted it in their private records. But they dismissed it because Maya had already been diagnosed with nerve damage as an infant. But if they saw it, they should have removed it," Dr. Stevens said flatly. "At minimum, they should have investigated further, but Maya's hearing loss was already explained by her initial diagnosis. And obstructions, impacted cerumen, those are simple problems with simple solutions." Victoria's voice dropped to a deadly whisper. "They saw it and did nothing." "Not exactly nothing," Dr. Stevens said bitterly. "They continued billing you for consultations, for follow-ups, for experimental treatments, for therapies. Victoria, I'm looking at these invoices. You've spent millions of dollars on specialists who knew the real problem and chose not to fix it." Victoria stood up. Her hands were shaking, not with fear, but with rage. "And my groundskeeper?" she said slowly. "A 68-year-old man making $15 an hour saw what they refused to see, and he fixed it. With a pair of tweezers," Dr. Stevens added quietly, "in a hallway, without causing any damage to the delicate structures of the ear. Victoria, I've been doing this for 30 years. What he did, if he'd been off by even a millimeter, he could have caused permanent damage, but he didn't." The extraction was clean, perfect, professional. Victoria grabbed her phone. Where did they take him? Which police station? The Southampton Town Police Department was relatively quiet at 11:30 in the evening on a Wednesday night. Robert sat in a holding cell, his back against the cold concrete wall. His wrists were bruised from the handcuffs. His uniform was torn. He'd been questioned for 2 hours. The officers had been professional but cold. They'd photographed his hands, taken his fingerprints, confiscated the tweezers and the extracted mass as evidence. The charges were serious: assault on a minor, practicing medicine without a license, endangering the welfare of a child. The officer had told him he'd likely be arraigned in the morning. Robert closed his eyes and prayed, not for himself, but for Maya, that she was okay, that the hearing would last, that it wasn't temporary, and he prayed for his granddaughter, that somehow someone would help her while he was locked away. Suddenly there was a commotion at the front of the station, raised voices, the sound of expensive heels clicking rapidly against linoleum. "I don't care what your procedures are, Lieutenant. You will bring him out now, or I will have your superior on the phone in 30 seconds. Robert recognized that voice. Mrs. Harrison. The desk lieutenant was flustered, clearly unaccustomed to being addressed this way. "Ma'am, I understand you're upset, but the suspect is being held on serious charges. You filed the complaint yourself." "I did not file anything," Victoria said coldly. "My housekeeper called 911 in a panic. I am the legal guardian of the alleged victim, and I am here to tell you there was no crime committed." Dr. Stevens appeared beside her, holding a folder of medical documents. "I'm Dr. Michael Stevens, Chief of Otolaryngology at Southampton Hospital. I've just examined the child in question. There is no injury, no assault. The man you're holding performed a medical extraction that saved this child's hearing. If anyone should be charged with negligence, it's the specialists who failed to do the same thing for 8 years. The lieutenant looked between them, clearly out of his depth. I'll need to call the district attorney. You do that, Victoria said. While you're at it, bring Robert Miller to your office. I'd like to speak with him. Ma'am, that's highly irregular. Victoria leaned forward, placing both palms on the desk. Lieutenant, I employ over 3,000 people. I have attorneys on retainer in 4 states. I donate generously to this town's police benevolent fund every year. And if you don't bring that man out of your holding cell in the next 3 minutes, I will make it my personal mission to ensure that every decision you've made tonight is reviewed by people who have the authority to end your career. Do I make myself clear? The lieutenant swallowed hard. Yes, ma'am. I'll bring him out. 5 minutes later, the cell door opened. Miller, you've got a visitor. Robert stood up, confused and exhausted. They led him to the lieutenant's office, a small, cluttered room that smelled of coffee and old paperwork. Victoria Harrison stood by the window. When Robert entered, she turned. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. Robert saw a woman who looked exhausted, her expensive suit wrinkled, her makeup smudged, but her eyes were clear. Victoria saw a 68-year-old man in a torn uniform with bruises on his wrists and dignity in his posture. Then the unthinkable happened. Victoria crossed the room in 3 steps, and she dropped to her knees in front of him. Robert's eyes widened in horror. Mrs. Harrison, no. What are you doing? Please stand up. I'm so sorry, she whispered, her voice breaking. Tears dripped onto the scuffed police station floor. I'm so sorry. Ma'am, please. Robert tried to reach for her, but his hands were still cuffed. You're my employer. You can't kneel for me. This isn't right. I'm not your employer, she said, looking up at him. Mascara ran down her cheeks. I'm a blind, arrogant woman who looked at your uniform and thought you were nothing. I looked at your hands and saw dirt. But God used those hands. She reached into her purse, pulled out a handcuff key, the lieutenant had given it to her, and unlocked Robert's cuffs herself. She threw the cuffs across the room. She took his rough, weathered hands in her perfectly manicured ones. You saved my daughter, Robert. The doctors just confirmed it. You did what 47 specialists with all their fancy degrees couldn't do. You gave me back my daughter's voice. Robert stood there, stunned. He didn't know what to say. Is Maya okay? He finally asked. Victoria let out a wet laugh. She's complaining that the hospital machines are too loud. She's perfect. Because of you. She stood up, composing herself, the steel returning to her spine. Let's get you out of here. The ride back to the hospital was quiet. Robert sat in the back of Victoria's Mercedes, still trying to process everything. He'd gone from a holding cell to a luxury car in less than an hour. Robert, Victoria said, breaking the silence, why were you working as a groundskeeper? You speak too well. The doctor said what you did required incredible precision. You have skills. Robert sighed, looking out the window at the wealthy neighborhoods passing by. I have a degree, ma'am. Chemistry from a state school. I wanted to go to medical school once, but life had other plans. He paused. And my granddaughter, she's sick. She has a kidney disease. The treatments are expensive. I couldn't wait for a better job. I needed income immediately. Your groundskeeper position paid weekly. That's all that mattered. Victoria stared at him, her expression unreadable. She's all you have, she said quietly. Your granddaughter. Yes, ma'am. Just like Maya is all you have. Victoria turned away, looking out her own window. She typed something quickly on her phone. When they walked into the hospital room, Maya was sitting up in bed, eating ice cream that one of the nurses had brought her. She heard the footsteps. She turned her head, not because she felt vibrations in the floor, but because she heard the sound. Robert, she said. The word was clearer now, more confident. Robert's face lit up. He forgot about Victoria, forgot about the police, forgot about everything. He crossed the room and knelt beside the bed. Maya, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Can you hear me? She grinned, a beautiful 8-year-old grin. I hear you. I hear everything. The machines, the people talking in the hallway, the cars outside. It's so much, Robert. So loud and so beautiful. She reached out and gently touched the bruise on his wrist where the handcuffs had been. "Owie," she said softly. "They hurt you." "Small Owie," he said, borrowing her words. "I'm okay." She threw her arms around his neck and hugged him tight. Robert closed his eyes, and tears he'd been holding back finally fell. Victoria stood at the door, watching them. She saw the bond. It wasn't just about the hearing. It was about love. Pure, selfless, attentive love. She cleared her throat. "Robert," she said. He stood up quickly, suddenly remembering his place. "Yes, ma'am? Tomorrow morning, you won't report to the maintenance shed." Robert nodded, expecting this. The termination he had anticipated all along. "Yes, ma'am, I understand. You'll report to the Human Resources Department of Harrison Energy. I'm creating a new position, Director of Health and Safety. The salary is substantial. You'll oversee wellness programs for all 3,000 of my employees." Robert's jaw dropped. "Ma'am, I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything yet," Victoria continued, stepping into the room. "That's just the day job. I'm also establishing a foundation, the Maya Harrison Foundation. We're going to find every child who's been misdiagnosed by negligent doctors. And you, Robert, are going to run it. Me?" His voice was barely a whisper. "You have the eyes for it. You see what others miss. And your granddaughter," she paused, "has been transferred to the VIP medical wing here at Southampton Hospital as of 30 minutes ago. Her kidney specialist has been consulted. Whatever treatment she needs, including transplant evaluation and surgery, is covered, completely." Robert's legs gave out. He grabbed the edge of Maya's bed to steady himself. He looked at Victoria, then at Maya, then back at Victoria. "Why?" he choked out. "Why would you do all this?" "Because you gave me back my daughter's voice," Victoria said softly, her own voice thick with emotion. "Everything I have is useless if I can't use it to say thank you." 6 months later, the garden of the Harrison estate looked completely different. Music played from speakers, soft classical pieces mixed with popular songs. Children's laughter rang out across the lawn. It was Maya's 9th birthday party. Children ran around the grass, screaming and playing tag. In the middle of them was Maya, laughing the loudest. She stopped running when she heard a familiar sound, the iron gates opening. A black car rolled in, but Robert wasn't opening the gate. He was sitting in the back seat, wearing a tailored navy suit that fit him perfectly. He stepped out, looking like a completely different man, filled with confidence and purpose. Maya saw him and sprinted across the lawn. "Robert!" she screamed, a beautiful, loud, piercing scream that made several adults wince and smile at the same time. She jumped into his arms. Robert spun her around, laughing. "Happy birthday, Maya," he said, setting her down. "Did you hear the music?" she asked excitedly, pulling on his jacket. "Did you hear it? Mrs. Coleman let me pick all the songs." "I heard it," he said, grinning. "It's perfect." Victoria walked down from the veranda, a genuine smile on her face, something that had become more common in the past 6 months. She shook Robert's hand warmly. "The foundation just got approval for the new pediatric center in Queens," Robert reported, his eyes shining with pride. "We've identified 12 more children with similar cases to Maya's. We're scheduling evaluations starting Monday." "Good," Victoria nodded. "Very good." She looked across the lawn at her daughter, who was now showing her friends how to do cartwheels, spinning and laughing, drinking in every sound of joy around her. Victoria looked back at Robert. "You know," she said quietly, "I spent millions of dollars looking for a miracle abroad, flying to the best hospitals, consulting with the top specialists in the world. I never imagined the miracle was right here, wearing a work uniform at my gate." Robert smiled, watching Maya dance with her friends. "My grandmother used to say something," he said softly. "God doesn't always shout. Sometimes he whispers, and sometimes he tapped his ear gently. He hides the answer in plain sight, waiting for someone willing to really look." Across the garden, Maya laughed, a sound like silver bells, clear and bright and real. "Loud and clear," Victoria whispered, her eyes glistening. "Loud and clear." And for the first time in the history of the Harrison estate, the silence was gone, replaced by the beautiful, chaotic symphony of life, the sound of a child who could finally hear her own joy, the sound of a second chance, the sound of a miracle that costs nothing but attention, courage, and a pair of tweezers in the hands of someone who still believed that seeing a child in pain meant you had to do something about it. even when the whole world said it was impossible. We want to hear from you, so please leave your thoughts in the comment section below. If you know someone who needs a little inspiration today, don't hesitate to share this video with them. And finally, if you want to join us for more amazing tales just like this one, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on that notification bell. That way, you'll be the very first to know whenever we post a brand new video. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.